So just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me all right. Cool. All right. So blended learning. So just real quick about me. Um, this just completed my 11th year in schools here. So 10 years of teaching 8 through 12. I taught communication arts literature as well as social studies. I just completed my first year as a technology specialist for my district. And I've incorporated just about every kind of teaching style you can imagine. Project-based learning, flipped teaching, pretty much anything. So I want to start by asking you, please type in your response in the comment box, and James will read off a couple of them. So to you, what is blended learning?
Okay, Morgan, we have a couple. The answers here are pretty much similar. Just read a couple. Combination of learning in class with online learning, combination of self-paced online learning and face-to-face instruction, and yeah, all the answers are pretty similar here to one of those to those what I just said.
All right, cool. All right, so a definition that I pulled off of website here. The blending of traditional teacher-focused in-person class with online learning that's more individualized and student-focused. So some of the key words I did just hear James read off, like online, blended, and self-paced, student-focused, very similar. So from blendedlearning.org, if you're not familiar with this website, it's a great site to look at. It's got a lot of resources for you. It says the phenomenon of blended learning has its roots in online learning and represents a fundamental shift in instruction that has the potential to optimize for the individual student in ways that traditional instruction never could, which is a really fancy way of saying what you all just said. Now, we've all been teachers, at least for a little while, and I'm sure you've all come across this mentality of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think we found out recently that things definitely need a little tweaking. But there will be people who are going to ask, why should we look at different educational models or theories? And to that, to this idea of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Swiss watches and clocks, things like that. But once upon a time, Switzerland made over 90% of the world's clocks and watches. That was their number one export. Then someone came up with a new design, a new technology, and the people who were in charge, the muckety mucks in Switzerland, said, why would we change? People already buy our stuff. They want the quality. They want the Swiss made. So they didn't update. They didn't change their process, their factories, anything like that. So that person went and sold the technology to someone else outside of Switzerland. Today, Switzerland makes up about number 3 on their export list are watches and clocks. So they went from just dominating the market to now it's not even their top export. And they even changed what it means to be Swiss made. So now only 60% of the cost or the parts need to be done in Switzerland for it to be Swiss made. So they went from 100% to 60%, and they're still only the third export. So you can imagine what kind of toll that took on their economy. So we have students today that are living in a very different world. They have different learning strengths, different access. I know my largest class has been over 50 students. So we have different class sizes than probably what we all experienced when we were students. We've got more distractions. I'm sure a lot of people have had issues with cell phones in the classroom and things like that. With distance learning, there's definitely a lot of distractions. We got higher level independence, all sorts of things. And many schools found out during the closure that the model they were operating on definitely needs some tweaking. But that said, there's a lot of overlap with blended learning to other learning styles. If you're used to using flex spaces, flipped teaching, the vending machine or a la carte model, stations, rotations, expansion homework, project-based learning, whatever you're used to using, there's a lot of similarities with blended learning. So the good news is if you've never used blended learning before, you don't need to scrap everything. Honor the work that you've done, honor the time you've put in, stick with what works, just make a few tweaks to make it work a little differently. So some key features of hybrid learning. Obviously, the use of technology. In the question I asked at the beginning, a lot of you mentioned online. So yeah, technology. Give students varying amounts of control over their learning. So whether they're the co-pilot of their learning or the solo driver of their learning, I mean, that's really how much you give them is kind of up to you and up to the student. So that they might be able to figure out when they learn. I had a lot of students this past year who were doing their work at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., but the work was getting done. Now, it's very different than what we're used to, where it's from 9:10 to 10 o'clock, you're doing this work at this time in my class. Where they learn has definitely gone through a big shift right now. And as far as I know, we still don't have a clear mandate from the state as far as what that learning, where it's going to be for this coming year. I think all school districts are planning on all three possibilities, whether it's completely at home, partially at school, or completely at school. So we'll see what that goes. Uh, they might have a choice on which rabbit hole they go down. We've all been on the internet, gone down a rabbit hole. Next thing we know, 2-3 hours have gone by. But a lot of learning happens when you go down those rabbit holes. And the reason it does is because of our own interests. And then how fast they get there within reason. So there's a lot of putting this on the students, giving them choice and voice. And the big thing to remember is that when you're doing blended, when you're doing online, the online stuff is not just repeating what's done in the classroom. I don't know if any of you like bad movies, but there was a movie starring Kevin James several years ago called Here Comes the Boom. Henry Winkler had just an awesome role in that. I love the Fonz. Anyhow, there's a scene in the movie, and I wish I had the exact quote, but I'm going to paraphrase here, where he's talking about the frustration of being a teacher, and he says that you can't slow down for the kids that need it. You can't speed up for the gifted kids. There's too many kids in the classroom. You're just moving cattle. And I'm not sure if you've ever felt that way, but I know I felt the frustration in the past where I have my high level students who are just running through things real fast, and the students that need help. And when you've got 30 in a classroom, it's hard to do that in more of a traditional model. So what I want to show you now, we'll see if this works, knock on wood. I'm going to show you a video. It's about a 5-minute video about blended learning that focuses primarily on student pacing and student choice. If you're not able to hear it or it's not working, please just wave to the camera and I'll see you.
Morgan, some people are saying they can't hear, and I can't either, or it's very quiet.
Okay. Well, I can send out the link to everybody. I would recommend watching the video. Just it's I mean, it's done by a different platform, but it's a great little 5-minute video that focuses on student choice and voice. When we tested this out with our previous platform, it did work, but I was a little unsure about Zoom. So it's all right. We'll move on. All right. So obviously we will move on from the thoughts and reactions to the video. All right. So some best practices to keep in mind when you're looking at blended learning. So beginning of the class reminders, if you have students working at different pace and you've set up a pacing guide or, you know, by this date we should be at this point, by this date we should be at this point, beginning class reminders on where you should be going, where you should be at, things like that. Those can be very, very helpful. Fully transparent pacing expectations. You don't want to blindside a student. They think they're going at a good pace and all of a sudden they should be done with it and they're only halfway through. Formative checks. In the video, there were exit tickets at the end of every single day. I like a little bit more formative checks than that when I've done this. So if you have students in person, it's a lot easier just to go sit down with them, but in distance learning, those formative checks can be any number of things. Grouping, pairing, tutoring, student tutoring, you tutoring. We've got consistent norms are a big thing. Front end, expect to spend a lot of time training students in this model if they have not done it before. And even if they have done blended learning, what it looks like in your class might be a little different. So just like you do with right now at the beginning of the school year, you do a lot of front end stuff. Plan on that with blended learning, maybe even schedule a little extra time. Make sure there are ample online resources for students to be independent and timely when needing help. They shouldn't always have to go to you. In fact, a lot of students are more comfortable going to YouTube or chatting with friends or going online to find answers than they are sometimes asking teachers or asking other students for help. So honor that and make sure you have those resources available. Also keep in mind that students, if they're working at 2 a.m., may try and reach out to you at 2 a.m. and want an answer right then. So having those additional resources, those different places to go for help can make your life a lot easier, can reduce the frustration of the students, and remove some of those hurdles. Check-ins beyond just the formative assessments. I'm just going to reiterate that because those formative assessments, when you're doing blended, when you're doing distance learning, things like that, those formative assessments are key. And when you've got maybe 8 different students at 8 different points in a lesson, those formative assessments will make your life so much easier, make it so much easier for you to track things. I used to use a tracker on a sheet of paper because I'm a little old school when it comes to stuff like that. So I'd have their name and I'd just be kind of keeping track of where they're at. That made it easier for me when I do the formative assessment. I'd sit down with them and I'd have that sheet. I tried to do it online with a spreadsheet before, but then I kept forgetting to bring my computer with me, and that was just kind of a me thing. So if you're a little old school, paper works just fine. All right, so we're all familiar with the who, what, where, when, why, so I kind of bolded some things here. So some examples: allowing students to view lectures on their schedule. So maybe it's at 2 a.m. that they're watching a lecture. Allowing students to pick who is teaching them the material, like watching a video or attending a live lecture for you. I think a lot of us have had class time or scheduled office hours during this distance learning. Maybe that's how you do it. You record it, you post it later. Maybe you provide a reading document for a student who just doesn't want to watch a video for whatever reason. Choice of assessment types. A lot of us know that through education theory that not every student does really well with a test, and multiple choice tests can be what they can be. So having different assessment types can be very useful. Having a variety of what things that fit with your unit topic, subtopics covering a variety of interest. So if you have the standard, you know what you want them to cover. In ancient history, there's a standard that basically says students will know about ancient Greece, ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Persia, all the big cultures around the Mediterranean. So you have a lot of variety there if you're doing that standard. What did you want them to cover about ancient Egypt? So you can pull some different subtopics so the student can pick from their interest level. Opening up when so the students can go back or work ahead. Second, a student gets done and has nothing to move on to, you risk losing that student. Adding a second where for their learning, so not everything happens in the classroom. Obviously, that's not as big of an issue right now, but adding a variety of types of teaching so students can pick how they learn. So labs, manipulatives, games. If you're big into game theory in the classroom, that is oftentimes a great way for students to learn topics, or at least introduce them to topics. Labs and manipulatives. I know at the elementary level, manipulatives are very popular, but they're still popular at the high school level. A little harder to do at home maybe, but there are a lot of online labs out there that have manipulatives, things like that. And then using your in-person teaching to fill in, scaffold, or expand upon the online learning. If you're not familiar with it, the SAMR model is great to look into. Talks about kind of where you want to go to with hybrid learning. So if you're using technology just to substitute, that's a really low level. What you want to get to is redefinition. So if you're not familiar with this, you can Google it, it'll come up real fast. What I have found is that a lot of teachers who use technology, all they're doing is substitution. They use a video instead of their lecture. They use this, say, a Google form or a Schoology quiz instead of the paper quiz. It's the exact same thing, just using technology. Not saying that's bad, but you can move beyond that. So some things to consider when you're looking at your lesson plans, when you're looking at what you're planning to do. Are students using tech to do the same work at the same pace as the rest of the class, i.e. the traditional model? You could get around that by using something like Actively Learn, which takes your readings and puts them online to make them interactive. Is your tech just supporting traditional instruction? For example, you take the video lecture you were going to do and you put it into Edpuzzle, add some questions in there, make your lecture more interactive, and then put that into your Google Classroom, Schoology, Moodle, Blackboard, whatever your school's LMS is. Traditional classroom, you get your read, write, think, pair, share, fishbowl, your different activities. You can still do these in blended learning. It just takes a little more prep work and a little more thinking how to make that work. Are students given the driver's seat? For example, maybe you want them to read some news articles. Give them some choice. Use Newsella, however you pronounce it, to do some self-interest readings. For example, students who are big in the NFL, there was just a news story this morning I saw on ESPN about a football player that caught a 200-pound plus fish. So he caught a fish that was bigger than him. No, it had to be a 300-pound fish. I forget exactly here. And the picture looks photoshopped. It looks fake, but I consider the ESPN to be a somewhat reliable news source. So 325-pound fish. So that some students would definitely be hooked on that as a news story. Maybe it's not terribly useful, but you could have them find things as long as it supports whatever you're working at in your classroom. Is your tech used to increase personalization? They find a video maybe on YouTube that they think is good. Then they put it into something like Edpuzzle or onto a Google site or something like that to try and make it more interactive. So they're telling you this video is great. This taught me the concept. Here's what I like about it. And they're doing the metacognition around the video. So not only are they learning the topic, but now they're going way beyond. And then shift from uniformity, teacher-focused fundamentals teaching. You can still include activities like the fishbowl, but doing more of the think, pair, share. Uh, so kind of a comparison of traditional to blended here. With traditional, you know where things are going to lead for the most part. I mean, there are always those students who bring up the weird comments to try to get you off topic, to get you to talk about, whatever. With blended learning, sometimes you don't know 100% where things are going to go, and neither do kids. That's not necessarily a bad thing, just is to get you a little bit out of your comfort zone maybe when you first start doing it, because you're used to controlling the pace, you're used to controlling the info. You're maybe the sage on the stage if you're a traditional model. With blending, you can limit, you can guide, you can set minimums, you can add parameters, but ultimately the student somewhat dictates the pace and the info. The teacher is the gateway of knowledge and learning in the traditional model. Where it kind of flips in blended learning, think of yourself more like a coach or a para rather than the sage on a stage. You're there to help guide the student on their learning journey. So some of Maslow's levels for the teacher are more met with the traditional style, whereas in blended you might not always know what to expect. But the students I found really enjoy the more choice in the voice and things like that, and their own pacing. So the big thing is a lot of the traditional model is based on regurgitation, whereas the blended is more focused on skills and lifelong learning. And that's what I really like, is the skill focus. So here's what I'm going to ask is that you're going to post in the comment whether you think this is blended or not. So yes or no. Yes for blended, no for not. Using Desmos, an online graphing calculator, to do the assignment for your worksheet. Students go online, they use Desmos graphing calculator to graph and then put the answer on their worksheet. James, if you could. I think if I click on the chat box, everyone's going to see everyone's answers.
Yep, I'm getting lots of no's here.
Good. Yeah, that all you're doing is substitution. Using an online graph calculator instead of a regular calculator, graphic calculator. All right, giving students a worksheet that has them depth of knowledge on a subject through any means they wish, readings, videos, online experts, tuning into your lecture, whatever.
A lot of yeses.
All right, so the first two were pretty easy. Now I'll try to get a little more of a gray area. All right, setting up due dates for assignments, but opening up all the assignments of a unit at once. So your entire unit.
Got a mix of yeses and no's here.
Because it all depends on what your assignments are. If your assignments are all worksheets and packets, and you open them all up, it's not blended learning. It does have maybe the timing aspect of it, but if all the assignments are due at once, or so there's some gray area there, but for the most part, I would say depending on how you do your lessons. Doing a 3-2-1 for the news article you assign before students leave the room. So 3 things they learn, 2 things they, I forget what the 3-2-1 is without the chart in front of me. 3 things you learned, 2 things you liked, 1 question you had.
Getting some no's here. Everybody's got a no.
Yeah, good. Having students discuss a video you gave as homework using a think, pair, share.
right, we've got all yeses.
Uh, it all depends, again, on how you do it. If the video is just reinforcing what you did in the classroom, then it's not really moving into blending, because blending should be beyond or different from the classroom. So it all depends, but it definitely can be and it should be, but we'll see. Uh, so this is, I kind of stole this from an 8th grade teacher I used to work with. This was his unit. So what I'm going to want you to do is identify some issues with this. You can type them into the chat as you identify them, and then we'll have James kind of read them off. So you're an 8th grade science teacher. You want to cover environmentalism. So traditionally, you implement this 8-week unit leading up to winter break. You give vocab and have students write definitions from your in-class lectures. You watch some video clips and pose questions to your class. Students read Into Thin Air Monday, Wednesday, Friday, answer the worksheet questions about pollution, and they share along with their Think, Pair, Share and 3-2-1 activities. Nothing is homework unless they're absent. Every Friday is a multiple choice formative test and a formative assessment multiple choice test at the end of the unit. Which is the same questions as the quiz. So there should be a lot of issues with this unit if you were trying to do it as blended learning. Not saying it's a bad unit from the traditional model. I really like this teacher. I don't want to, make him feel bad if he's sitting in on the lesson here.
All right, here's some of the answers, Morgan. Nothing is blended, pacing, everyone's in the same place, due dates, not self-paced and students don't have choices, still scripted when things are to be done.
So some ways you could change this. What are some ways that you could change this rather than me telling you?
The answer was open it up to their own inquiry on the topic. Give students an opportunity to explore a given topic prior to starting the unit. Excellent advice there.
Mm-hmm. What some of you might encounter is that the district says you have to cover a certain, maybe a book. Like let's say the district said you had to cover this book, what was it called again? Into Thin Air, I think it was called. So if the district says you have to have students read this book, I'm not sure how you do that. You probably have to do it online right now, but and students are going to struggle with vocabulary. You need to check to see where they're reading at. All these other things.
A couple other answers here, Morgan. Students could find video examples and reflect on them. Also find local examples.
Nice.
Choice formative and summative PBL, project-based learning, showcasing learning in different ways than tests and vocab. Have students create personalized vocab definitions. Have students, yep.
All right, excellent. So you've still covered everything that this teacher he had put into his unit, all with everything you just said. But what you did is you made it more blended. So that's awesome. I always thought it was strange that he was defining what words the students didn't know. I mean, we can guess what words our students are going to struggle on. But if most of the students in the class know the word, now they're bored while you're going over the definitions, and bored students tend to make poor choices. So, yeah, it was a fun unit. The kids did like it at that school, but yeah, he was more into the substitute phase. Students might grab their computers and write the definitions on a doc, but yeah. All right. So some things to consider. Does your school have an LMS? If you're going to be doing blended learning, where are you going to be putting your stuff? Are you going to put links to things? Where are you going to put them? Maybe you have Schoology, maybe you have Google Classroom, maybe you have Moodle. Maybe if you don't have any of those, Google Classroom is free for schools if the school signs up. Schoology and Moodle cost money. But on your own, I was at a school for a few years that didn't have an LMS, so I just did Edmodo, which is free, and that worked really well until we moved to Schoology, and then later to Google Classroom because it was free. Does your school use any kind of credit platform like Edgenuity or Apex or whatever? Those, you can pull out specific things for students, so you can make it a little blended, but they're not really set up to be blended. But you can use supplementary platforms like Khan Academy. Some students really like it. Some students really hate it. But one of the nice things, if you do use Schoology, you can set up the unit so that students can't move on from topic one until they get a certain score, and then they can go on to the next assignment, There's a video game I used to like to use called Teacher Invaders. It's the old Starship or Space Invaders game. Except there were teachers coming down and the students were in spaceships trying to shoot the teachers. Security lady at my school did not like that game, but the students liked it. And then every 10 seconds, the game would stop. They had to answer a question. If they got it wrong, the spaceship blew up. If they got it right, they got to go back. I could set it in Schoology so they couldn't move on to the next activity until they had gotten at least a 40% on that introductory game. So if you have an LMS, you can use this quite effectively for blended learning. Big thing to keep in mind, blended doesn't mean that your lessons have to be you don't have to have the entire year planned out, but you do want to be at least one unit ahead of that fastest paced student. I had a class of 60 to 70 students last year, and I did completely blended learning because a lot of my students only came to school 2 days a week, 3 days a week max. And I was literally just one unit ahead because I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't even know I was going to be teaching that class until 1 week before the semester started. So for a long time, the first month or so, 2 months, I was just one unit ahead of my fastest student. So don't feel like you have to have the whole year planned out if you're looking at doing blended learning. I don't want you to start pulling out your hair because you'll start to look like me pretty fast. Just know that you only have to go so fast until you get things done. Let's see, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're getting about 11 minutes. So I'll open this up to you. So we got a chance here for you to ask some questions. I tried to talk pretty fast to get through stuff so we could get to this end time here. I apologize if I went too fast for you or got too monotone and did the whole Ferris Bueller teacher thing. So you can either, option one, take some time to look at one of your own lessons that you might be trying to figure out, how can I make this blended? And you've got a chance now, I can give you advice one-on-one, or any just general questions you have, now's a good chance. You can type them into the box, or if it's a really long question, you could just maybe say, hey, James, I got a really long question, hard to explain.
I want to go back and watch the video. Where's the link? Somebody said they already found the link and then watched it ahead of time. I'm just wondering where the video clip link is.
I can, so the link here is down at the bottom of the presentation, okay. But I can also tell you the name of it, and then that should make it easier to find. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
It's also on the our schedule.
Oh,
so
good.
If you go back out to our schedule, when you click on this session, it'll have supporting documents in there, and you just click on his video that's provided.
Okay, I'm going to check that out. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you for that. I wasn't sure. We made a switch last week from the platform we were going to use to using Zoom. I wasn't sure if that. There's also a PDF that should be in there that it's from a company that wants your business, but if you scroll down, pages 4 through 6 are quite useful.
was able to find the link online and I just put it in the chat. So the video link is now in the chat.
For other sessions that I was interested in but couldn't attend because you choose one, that's where I went, was to each session and clicked on the supporting documents provided so that I could still look through them and find what was applicable or what I wanted to save.
Smart, smart.
Say, Morgan, if you are finding yourself in a potential hybrid situation that you have never experienced before as an educator, is there one thing that you would recommend to start? Because it's pretty overwhelming. There's a lot. And so, like, through your own trial and error or those of your colleagues, are there things that you learned from that you'd say, if I had to identify the first thing I should do, what would that be?
Besides breathe,
Yeah, besides keep, sanity.
so my first suggestion is look at what you've done that's worked. Things that you've done, look at your teaching style, because everyone has their own style. You have your own strengths, you have your own everything. So look at what works. I've always been pretty tech savvy in my classes and like to use a lot of different technology that was useful, but then that's because I would play with stuff ahead of time. If you're going to use any tech, play with it at least a week or two ahead of time. I've seen a lot of teachers try and do something the night before and then implement it in their class. It doesn't work. It's the only thing they had planned, or now they're so frustrated and flustered. It's not a good situation. But you take a look at what works, and then you try and figure out, how can I make that work in this new situation? I like to do a lot of discussions with my students, have them react, give me responses. So if I were to sit down and go, okay, how can I get students to respond to me, give me their opinions, their thoughts? And then I would look maybe online, find out how I could do that. Okay, I could do discussion boards, or I could use something like Flipgrid. Students can respond verbally, short recording, post it. Schoology has that option. If you put it as, if you use Schoology, they can do a recording if you allow that. I think it's a checkbox. It's been a couple of years since I used Schoology. Things like that. If you use a Google platform, they can do something, say, on a Google site. So they can give you their response, but they're not necessarily interacting with each other at that point. If you're using something like Flipgrid, you can open it up so they can react to each other. So I would start that way.
Morgan, we got 5 minutes left. Another question someone had was, what's your top 3 things you would advise to a school or teacher that's just starting blended learning?
Patience. Not everything's going to go smoothly. If you're not a first-year teacher, you've probably had a situation where something didn't work. Your projector bulb went out, internet's not working. I was in a school once where some construction was being done down the road. They cut the power lines and we had no lights in the classroom, no electricity. And the administration's advice to us was keep teaching because they'll come back on eventually. So things are going to happen. So the big thing is, if you need a stress ball, get yourself 20 of them. Whatever that is, so breathe, relax. After that, you really can't emphasize enough student feedback. The students are the learners. They already know some stuff. Sending out surveys before the school year starts can be very, very useful. You're only going to get a small percentage back, let's be honest. Some students won't do them. But using those students to get some feedback. How could we make this work? What have you used before? Do you like this option? Have you done this? Get that feedback from students. That is huge. A lot of school districts have done a lot of surveying, and what they found is when they were consistent with the surveys and they were meaningful surveys and the students saw the results being implemented, that the responses started to increase and they got more and more responses. So that's a second bit of advice. explore and use each other's resources. There are going to be some teachers in your district that are very knowledgeable in certain areas. We all have our strengths. So leaning on each other. If you don't know anybody in the district or you're not comfortable with talking to people in the district, go to Twitter. There are a lot of people on Twitter that have different suggestions, things like that. So that's 3. I think he asked for 5, but I'm kind of long-winded.
3 was fine. Yep.
Okay.
They asked for 3.
Okay.
One thing I threw in the chat was I don't know if there's a session on this, but I just started using Nearpod last spring, and I got a grant to have a full subscription. And Nearpod's a great great thing to use. I just wanted to add that myself. We had one more question, and how can I take a safety lesson and with a table saw and create a blended learning lesson?
Well, there's a few things you could do. So I'm shooting off the top of my head here. One thing might be that some students would like, if you're working with high schoolers, they love gross usually and disturbing type things. So I might have my students look up some table saw injuries, maybe even find some videos of like cartoon characters who've, maybe not Tom and Jerry, but I'm sure Family Guy has some video clips of table saw accidents that they've used. Or maybe even That 70s Show. I seem to recall a clip where the shop teacher had like 3 fingers. So, you could find some stuff like that. So you're covering some of the safety, but they're finding the videos they like. You could start off maybe with a little bit more formative discussion, things like that, rather than dictating, and use the discussion to lead you into the areas they need to go. Let's see. You might be able to find a lab online or a game online that has to do with table saws. I'm not sure.
We have about 1 minute left, Morgan.
Okay. That's a tough one, though. And I will let you know that if you're looking for tech, I'm also doing one of these tomorrow on technology. Most of them are free, so feel free to, if you're not able to attend that, you look up the presentation later, you'll see a lot of the names on there. So, well, I thank everyone for coming.
Thank you, Morgan, for the great presentation, and to all the participants. Reminder to please complete the survey on the survey widget, and reminder that the session will be viewable in the recorded sessions. And have a great rest of the conference, everyone. It's been a pleasure to join you today.
Bye, everyone.
Well, thank you, Morgan. Great job.
Thank you.
Pleasure to work with you.
Well, good luck with this coming school year.
Yep, and you too.
Thank you. Oh, hi, Bonnie.
Hey, Bonnie.
Hey, thanks to the 2 of you for being a part and jumping in and giving the session. You had some good engagement, which I was glad to see, especially at the end where you were able to answer real specific questions.
Yeah, I thought it went really well. Morgan did a great job.
Thank you. It's a little different doing it online, but I think it went all right. So other than the video not working, and it's fine because it's in the link, they can watch it. So
yeah. I think we're all learning about online PD and what are the things that work and don't work, and everybody's figuring out as a participant as well, like, okay, what do I need and how do I stay engaged and so on. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Well, Morgan, I know you're back on tomorrow as well.
Yep. All about technology.
Terrific.
Well, you both have
all right. Well, I appreciate you.
Good day.
Being here.
All right, we'll see you, Morgan. Good luck tomorrow.
You too. Or if you are doing tomorrow, yeah.
I don't think so, but I'm sure it'll be good.